Happy New Year, everybody. Dr. Joe Vitale here, and it's another episode of Zero Limits Living. But now we have to do something different. We already went through 2020. It sucked. We already went through 2021. Wasn't much better. Now we're going into 2022. What are we going to do about this? If we allow the nature and flow of things to continue, we may be complaining about this year too. And my stance is, and the whole thrust of this TV show is about having no limits. So we want to stop giving our power away. We want to take back control. We're not God. We don't have total control of the universe, but we have control over our personal lives, and we can influence and direct where we're going to go. As we're going into 2022, now it's our opportunity to awaken, to decide, to choose, and to take action. Now, I'm not a guy who believes in resolutions. I don't know where you stand with them, but if you've been around the planet long enough, you know they don't work. You can state resolutions, but in a couple weeks, you're going to forget them. And then you'll make rationalizations and excuses for why they weren't important to you anyway, and you'll push them off until the following year. But what about now? What are you going to do now? And what's better than resolutions? What actually works? I want to help you. I'm Dr. Joe Vitale, and every week I bring you inspiration and information designed to lift the lid on what's possible for you, to remove the invisible barriers so that you can have, do, and be virtually anything you can imagine. And I know you may be skeptical, you may be critical, but I'm asking you to just listen. Listen for a little bit, take some notes, and then apply what feels like something you can do and see where it takes you. As we go into this new year, anything is possible. Anything. So I want you to dream big, but I also don't want you just to rely on me and what I have to say. We all know from last week's episode that I can talk all by myself. My guest didn't show up. I still don't know where he is. I hope he's okay. And I did a rant and rave monologue for the next 40 minutes, but not this time. I have a legend. I have an icon. I have a genius. I have a man who has been my friend, my colleague, my partner, my ally. I get a little choked up thinking about this. He's been in my corner and with me since the last century. He's been one of my tried and true friends who's always there through thick and thin, through the rough rides, through all the other years. And we've supported each other on everything that you could imagine. He's one of the internet pioneers. His name is Mark Joyner, and you can see him there because, his face is right there. He's up early. He's in Thailand, and he got up again as a dear friend would. He got up at 4 a.m. I think it's 5 a.m. there at this point. Mark, thank you for doing this.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, man. And right back at you with all of that.
Well, a little bit about Mark, because we can talk quite a bit. He's got a long biography. He has had about 30 different startups. He has been one of the most successful online entrepreneurs in internet history. He was the first to have an ebook digital publishing house. He was the first to publish my first ebook. And if you heard the interview where I was with Marlon Sanders a few episodes past, Marlon remembers, and so do I also well, where I said back in the 1990s, nobody's got to buy an ebook. Look at the books behind me. They're real. I want a real book. I don't want a digital book. I don't want an invisible book. I don't want this stupid thing called an ebook. But Mark was polite and persistent. He's been in the military, so he knew how to just keep pressing on. He kept pressing on, and one day to shut him up, I gave him one of my books. It was called Hypnotic Writing. And I said, here, take this, turn it into whatever this ebook thing is. He did. He wrote a sales letter for it. I read the sales letter, and it was so good I wanted to buy my own book. And then he put it up for sale. And overnight, there were like 600 orders. And I realized there's no inventory. There's no warehouse. There's no shipping. This is easy money. And this all came from Mark Joyner teaching me about digital marketing and about ebooks. He's also the founder and president of Simpleology, which is one of his several best-selling books. And Simpleology is all about the art and science of cutting down the time and the effort it takes for you to achieve results. So I felt that it was entirely relevant and appropriate that Mark be here at the beginning of 2022 so we can talk about how to help you achieve your goals, how to decide on the goals, how to achieve the goals, how to make 2022 embarrass all the previous years. And that's why I brought Mark here. Mark, did you know that's why I brought you?
You know, I just showed up here ready to do whatever you wanted me to do, man, because, I'll support you in anything you're doing. Nothing we've done together has ever gone wrong. So I imagine this will be another grand slam.
Thank you. Well, maybe you should tell me a little bit and tell the people watching about Simpleology so we have a sense of where you're coming from and your mindset when it comes to accomplishing results.
Yeah, so that company started out back when I did the whole internet farewell thing. I was, while I was a pioneer of a lot of the stuff going on the internet, I was also a pioneer in being attacked by mobs of people on the internet as well, which is de rigueur for anybody who has any amount of fame on the internet now. Back then, I was just this dude who was like, I don't know how to deal with this. I'm getting out of here. I don't want to have to put up with that. So I did my, famous farewell thing.
Yep.
And after that, which was great, you and I worked together on that as we have on so many other things. I started consulting for people behind the scenes, and people were coming to me for marketing advice. And what I began to quickly realize was that they didn't really need my marketing advice so much. They had fantastic marketing ideas. The problem was they were just super broken in terms of their own productivity. And so speaking of that, you're one of the most productive guys I've ever met. You're like, you get an idea and boom, you start acting on it. And like, you're not one of these guys who gets an idea and says, okay, well, maybe someday I'll do that. You have the inspiration, and like you teach, you're one of the most congruent guys I know. You actually, when you get that inspiration, you immediately start doing something about it. And it's a sight to behold. And that kind of sensibility, along with many, many other really important realizations, were the things I realized people needed to know to really be successful, because they were operating under this illusion where they're going to get, the next, great idea, the next secret, they're going to take one more course, they're going to do one more thing, one more guru is going to give them permission to be successful.
Right.
None of that matters as much as unbreaking their productivity. So Simpleology was born in that context.
And so you've helped at this point a whole lot of people, because Simpleology has been around for quite some time.
Yeah, it's like 17 years now.
17 years. I wasn't even thinking of 17 years, but time does fly.
Yeah, it does.
17 years. And so you have a database and story base of hacks and stories and successes that help people get to the results that they want. And this is what I want to look at for 2022. See, my commitment is to help everybody that is taking the trouble to tune in to Zero Limits Living. And so while they're tuning in here, I know that many of them are stuck. Many of them are struggling. Many of them are probably starving. Many of them are confused. Now we're into a new year, and I see it as a massive opportunity to direct our energies and direct our lives. I looked up a bunch of different quotes about New Year's and New Year's resolutions and intentions, and none of them really resonated except for this key concept. And the key concept is, it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter what happened up to now. The story picks up now. The story picks up in this moment. And we can have what's called a plot twist, and we can redirect where we're going into the new year. You can even have a character twist and reinvent yourself as you go into the So what I want to do with you, Mark, is to kind of explore these ideas. They can pick up your book. We can give them a website for simpleology and so forth as we go through this. But I want to really help. I know what it's like to struggle. You know what it's like to have gone through all of that. Oh, yeah. What can we tell these people? First of all, I guess, what do you think of resolutions?
I'm not a super big fan of them. I haven't seen them work very well for people. It's, and in fact, I'm almost kind of against it because it becomes sort of this, self-flagellating exercise, where, why put yourself through that when it has never worked for you in the past?
Right.
So, I think that people need to get to a more fundamental, deeper understanding of the nature of things before they embark on this kind of enterprise.
Explain, please, the nature of things. That sounds intriguing. It's like there's a whole volume behind that statement.
There are many, right? You could write endless. Well, what I would say is, first off, when I make a statement like that, I need to put it in a larger context of something else that we teach inside simpleology, which is this concept I call utilitarian model flexibility, right? And it sounds like it's kind of a highfalutin, philosophical idea, but utilitarian for a purpose model, your model of the universe, flexibility, the ability to shift. So another way that I like to talk about that is useful lenses. You can take off a pair of lenses and put them on, and you can use different lenses for different purposes. And what people don't realize is that they don't have to get married or permanently attached to a particular view of the universe. They can change these things at will. And in fact, I think it's incredibly useful to be able to do that. And to give you one really super practical example, part of my military career, I was serving as an artillery officer, and they say that quantum physics disproved Newton, right? And it's actually not really true, right? It's only in the context of the quantum realm that Newton's laws are no longer in effect. So, when I was an artillery officer, we could put a round down range, 50 meters down or 50 kilometers down range, get close enough to a target to destroy it. That was all Newton all day long. We didn't give, two rips about, Einstein in any of that, right? So, you don't have to wear the Einsteinian lens. In fact, sometimes it's really super not useful to do that. So I want to give some useful lenses, right? That are useful to me.
Yes.
And allow people to pick and choose them as they see fit. So that would be the first fundamental thing. So the next one would be a metaphorical look at things. And from my book, Mind Control Marketing, I love military metaphors, right? Half of that book, which people don't really talk about as much because they talk about the psychological principles, which are all still super useful. But the military principles are equally useful in there. And one of the things I talk about is this thing that comes from, Sun Tzu's Art of War. And in the Art of War, he says, if you know yourself and you know your enemy, you can win every battle. Now I'm paraphrasing here because it's translated from Chinese and there are many different ways to translate that. Take that and take some other stuff that he talks about in the book, which is primarily that the ground upon which you are fighting is incredibly important, right? In fact, he classifies the type of ground that you're fighting on into 8 different types of ground. So what I want to alert people to is, understanding yourself is critically important. If we, don't factor that into what we're talking about, we're kind of right out of the gate setting ourselves up for failure. You've got to understand the terrain that you're on, and that would be the situation in the world, right? So while I'm in 100% agreement with you about zero limits and telling people like you have control of your life, and this is something that came up in a conversation that you and I had as well in relation to, the law of attraction and all of that stuff, was that it's not complete unless we talk about how the reality of the world that we are in, right? So we have to be aware of the situation, but not allow that situation to make us, let's just say, to render us inoperable, right? Mm-hmm. So those are the things that I would start with. Speaking of the nature of things, I think those are some of the most useful things I've come across in understanding the nature of things in a way that will make you more effective as a person. And that's an important word, effective, because that's what you want, is you want to create effects in the world. And if you can't do that, that's a very, very frustrating and terrible way to go through life, I would say.
So I love that foundation, and I want to hear some more about the lenses that we have choices to put on. I want to mention that as I've been thinking about intentions for the new year, I remember telling myself I want them to be, and this is the phrase I used, a believable stretch. A believable stretch. And what I mean by that is you live in Thailand, and one of my clients and one of my friends is a former homeless man who was a billionaire there.
Yeah.
And when he was first learning about the secret, law of attraction, goal setting, taking action, all the basics that really helped him become a billionaire, he didn't begin, his first goal wasn't, I want to be a billionaire.
Yeah.
His first goal was, I need lunch.
Yeah.
And then after that, I need a part-time job. After that, I need an apartment. After that. And so they were believable stretches. And as he kept making the stretch, he could enlarge the jump because now that believable stretch was going to be acceptable to him. And so when somebody says, oh, Napoleon Hill says, if you can, what is it? If you can conceive it and believe it, you can achieve it. And then they'll throw out some ridiculous thing like, I'm going to go to Mars and I'm going to open up the first fruit stand there. And I'm like, are you an astronaut? Are you have any connections to go to Mars? It's not conceivable or believable, so they're not going to attain it. So when I advise people, which is what I'm doing right now, and myself, to think about goals or intentions for the new year, let alone any time, the very first thing is a believable stretch. And so does that fit in with some of the lens that you're talking about? It's interesting. I have different colored glasses here, so I can put on the lens of the yellow reading glasses here, and I'll see the world completely differently. I got the blue ones over here, and if I want to go big time, I got green. So how does all of that fit? How do the lenses, our choices, believable stretches all fit with your advice and experience?
Before I answer that, I'll give one more metaphor about lenses. So, when we were in the military, we had these night vision goggles, which were very useful at nighttime, especially when the enemy doesn't have them. It's a really, really big deal. Not so useful at 12 noon, right? Unless your purpose is to blind yourself, right? Which is many people's purpose, in fact, it seems. So just to give people an idea of how radically different these lenses will allow us to see the world, and also the different contexts that make them more or less useful, right? So what I would say is, I think that's 100% right on. One of the ways that we talk about that inside simpleology is I have people, choose a short, medium, and long-term, major focus, right? And one of the things that I tell people is that all three of those things needs to be in alignment, right? You can have this thing that you want to do way off in the distance. Sure, if you want to go to Mars someday, that's fine. Keep that in the back of your mind, but remember that if you want to put a fruit stand on Mars, you might want to, see if you can manage a fruit stand in your backyard first, right? So I'm 100% with that. I think the alignment of all of those things when they are together, and it works differently for a lot of people, like you are sort of a little bit more like, hey, I got, a tentative idea of what I want to do. I'm going to dance with the universe, and sometimes the universe is going to change, and I'm going to just constantly dance with it, which is super cool too. Simultaneously, another way that works in other lenses is, you do pick something far off, and then you create steps. We have, another tool, that we use at Simpleology is something I learned in the military called backward planning, which is a, deviously simple and deceptively simple tool. And it's so useful. You just think of where you want to go, and then imagine, okay, what was I doing right before? Imagine I'm there. What was I doing right before that happened? What was I doing right before that? And right before that, and right before that. And you just, go backwards. And then as you look back on it, you go, okay, well, at this phase, I don't quite know what to do. And at this phase, I know what to do, but I don't know how to do it. And it allows you to develop a really, useful, practical plan that will, actually get you there if you're persistent enough. So yeah, I'm 100% with that. And I think that a lot of people, when they set up unrealistic goals, it's another very interesting self-flagellation technique, right? Where we're punishing ourselves in a way that's actually going to set us up for a certain amount of failure.
Yeah, and we forget we're the ones that selected the goal. We've made this goal too big, then we feel punished, or we feel like a failure if we don't achieve it. But we were the ones who set all of that up in order to feel a particular way. So it's a form of self-sabotage. So
Can be.
You partially answered something that I think I want a fuller answer on, or maybe a different answer. And that's the objection that people say when they go to write any goal or intention for a new year or any time. The big question comes up: how? Even if they believe it's a stretch, it's like, how am I going to do that? How is that possible? And they almost talk themselves out of it because they're hung up on the how. My own experience has been, when you're stating your goals, you don't worry about how at all. You concern yourself with what.
Yes.
Like, what do you want? And if you can add the why do you want it? Now you have the target, and now you have the fuel, the reason to go for the target. And you don't necessarily have how in terms of here's a whole plan to do it. You gave us one answer to that by talking about going backwards from its completion, the step back, and bringing it all the way back to here. Is there a different kind of answer or different kind of simple solution to the question of how?
There is indeed one that immediately comes to mind that is almost directly antithetical to that, in that it's less practical on the surface. Ultimately, it's super practical, but it takes a little bit of stretching in your thinking to understand how that's so. And what I'll say is, first, I want to sort of present the notion to people that maybe consciousness isn't a brain local phenomenon. Right now, some people are going to hear that and they're going to go, "Whoa, this is going to get a little woo-woo now." Let me tell you right now, there are some very, very serious scientists who are considering this. One of the greatest neuroscientists alive, who studied for decades near-death experiences, is now quite famous for putting out the idea that the brain is merely a reduction valve of consciousness, and that all thought doesn't originate in the brain. So why am I bringing this up? Well, altered states of consciousness, which I know both you and I have explored, quite a bit in many, many various ways, are a wonderful way to tap into ideas that will reveal the how. And all I can tell people is, I don't have the exact right answer for this, but what I do know is that by various types of meditation and, consciousness altering techniques, I seem to have been able to unlock access to more and grander ideas than the average person, right? Maybe I'm just more, diligent about acting on these things, but I know that there was sort of a before and after for me when I was younger and hadn't yet experienced some of these things. I would sit in front of a piece of paper not knowing what to write. Now that just kind of never happens for me. I don't experience writer's block anymore, right? Sometimes I don't want to do it, right? But if I sit down and I put my mind to, I've always got something to say now, right? In fact, I can go in front of an audience. I've been in front of audiences of 5,000 people where, the organizer told me, "Hey, I know you weren't here to speak, but the speaker just, ditched out. And would you go up on stage?" I was like, "Well, when? How about now?" "Oh, okay, sure. Let's go." Impromptu, 5,000 people, no problem, right?
Nice.
If somebody had told me that when I was a younger man, deathly terrified of public speaking, I would have said that you are out of your mind, dude, because I'm not even going to get on that stage with a year of preparation, right? So if you don't know how, you can ask your unconscious, whatever you want to call it, for the answer. And if you know the right ways, it is often revealed to you. And I know there are people out there who might think this sounds crazy, but again, I want to speak of scientists who have relied on this. Einstein, when he came up with the theory of relativity, was imagining what it would be like to ride a wave of light. Newton, when he, posited the theory of gravity, was, meditating under a tree. A lot of scientists talk about altered states of consciousness being a source for their inspiration. So whoever is watching, whatever your orientation is, please don't dismiss this idea, because it could be one of the most important things you've learned if you open yourself up to it.
And I totally agree. I want to give two responses that are triggered by what you just said. One more of a physical response and one more of a metaphysical response. The physical one is when people say they don't know what to do, or they don't know how to do it. They don't know what the next steps are. They don't know how to proceed. They don't know how to get from here to whatever the goal happens to be. I give them Theodore Roosevelt's quote where he says, do what you can with what you have right where you are.
Yes.
That's it. Do what you can with what you have right where you are. It is refreshingly shocking to see how easy that is to implement. Because you basically just look around and go, what can I do with what I got right in this moment? And then what happens is as you do that first step, the next step becomes apparent. You do that step, the next step becomes apparent. You can create the whole path that way. That's my physical response. The metaphysical response, and you and I have had separate conversations about this, so we can really go deep and explore this. But I've been calling it an esoteric internet. An esoteric internet, meaning that we are wirelessly connected. We are connected in a non-connected, wireless sort of way. And I think consciousness is the basis of it. So when you give the suggestion that, you can ask for the answer, you can ask for the steps, you can ask for the next opportunity. You can ask, and the answers that are going to come, yes, they can come from your unconscious mind, but it can come from the unconscious mind's connection to all minds, to what Napoleon Hill might have called the third mind.
That's right.
The other consciousness there.
I love what you're saying about, the immediately practical advice of do what you can with what you have, where you are.
Yes.
And you'll notice something that's interesting here, right? When you present a question to your mind, the mind will often give answers. And the interesting thing about that is the people who believe that that's not possible, when I say, hey, present the question to your mind of how am I going to get to Mars, right? Well, okay, so that's very, very far off for you, but you might be able to believe, hey, how I don't have any bread right now. How am I going to make a sandwich? Right. Well, that's going to be pretty obvious. Well, I'm either going to go to the store and buy some bread or make a breadless sandwich, or, there's all sorts of different things I can do, right? Create a new kind of bread. I mean, there's all kinds of thoughts that might come to mind. What I would tell people is start playing with your mind with really simple questions and notice how your mind comes up with answers, and then start, like you were saying, stretching a little bit in a believable way. And the more you stretch your mind, the more you'll find that you can get grand answers to, things that are known as unsolvable or impossible. And I want to say something that's really interesting about this. So to kind of expand people's minds, if you will.
Please.
So I'll ask you, Joe, do you believe the universe is infinite?
Infinite, yes.
Okay. So most people do, right? Most people believe it's infinite. And science would kind of concur with that, although, real science would say, well, we don't know. But what we do know is that no matter how far out we look, no matter how deeply we peer into the matter of reality itself, we don't seem to find an end. In fact, we're finding layers behind the periodic table with the nanomaterial revolution. There are people that are positing that there are even multiple universes in the multiverse theory. So I want to get people to really, really grasp the idea of infinity. And so two things, right? The second one is where the mind really kind of blows up when you think about it. So if the universe is infinite, there's a solution to every problem, right? But here's where it gets really, really, really just redonkulously crazy. So if the universe is infinite, not only is there a solution to every problem, there is an infinite number of solutions to every problem. Now let that sink in. That's what infinity implies. Because people, when they think of infinity, they think of this one. I don't think people really grasp how vast infinity is, but when you realize that there are infinite solutions to every problem, and that's what infinity implies, it goes, oh, damn. Now I'm starting to understand the nature of infinity. There's like literally zero limits, right? Yeah.
Perfect. Well, I can't, I'm going to play devil's advocate for a second, because in my mind, I just heard some people scream, but that means there's an infinite number of problems too.
True. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I tell you what, I mean, I would be in violent agreement with them, and what I can say is your tangible experience of life is going to clearly be affected by what you focus on, right? So, yeah, I mean, you can focus on all of those problems and bring them into your conscious awareness. That would be a rather stifling thing if you didn't focus on the solutions as well. But I think the problems are actually important, right? Because the problems, if we look at it through the Taoist lens of there being, this infinite series of light, dark, pain, suffering, joy, sadness, right? I mean, every different conceivable way of there being duality, then there must be a purpose for the duality. And what I would say is two things, and that's that without that suffering, your experience is going to attenuate, right? So if all you had was joy, it's not going to feel like joy anymore because you have nothing to compare it to, right? It's the contrast that really makes the existence that grand. And the other thing is, one useful lens of looking at the universe, or life at least, is that it's sort of like a growth machine, right? And that growth doesn't happen without a certain amount of suffering. When we, go to the gym, I mean, we have to suffer a bit. It's suffering that I choose to experience deliberately. We have to suffer a bit before we grow. And I don't know of any kind of growth that occurs without some challenge. I don't think growth occurs. And who knows, in an infinite universe, maybe it does, but I haven't conceived or experienced significant growth that has occurred without problems, right? So be grateful for those problems.
Let me pause, because I just want to reinforce what you just said. I love the concept that the universe is a growth machine. A growth machine. It's here for our growth. We're here for our own growth. I love that concept. And then the concept that there is struggle or there is suffering as part of that growth.
Yeah.
I'm with you on it, but I'm wondering out loud here, I'm wondering if how we define suffering will make us feel one way or the other about suffering. So in other words, I think it was, and I may have the quote wrong, but I thought Buddha had said, life is suffering. But once you accept life is suffering, it's no longer suffering.
That's right.
It was the acceptance of it. So you're going to the gym. You've lost 60 some pounds. When you were 40, you ran a marathon and you did it barefooted. And now you have like 8% body fat. I mean, this is amazing. And I've seen some of the videos of you in the gym that you've posted on Instagram and Facebook, I guess. And it looks like there's some form of struggle. It looks like some form of struggle going on. But what's going on in your mind when you're doing it? Are you thinking of it as distasteful pain, which is what some people would call struggle? Or are you thinking of this is my path to greatness? This is the toll I pay to get the physique I want. What are you actually feeling as you look at it? It may help us understand the word suffering.
Yeah. So that's interesting, right? And just show people. I mean, I used to be super fat, and now I'm like, and not to, when I say that word fat, please don't be offended if that is your experience right now. But one thing I just want to say really quickly is we have this weird thing in the world right now where we're telling people it's okay if you're fat. It's like, no, it's not okay. Okay. It's going to make you sick. It's going to downgrade your human potential. Okay. Get yourself fit. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise, that it's okay to just, be mediocre. No, it's not okay. You know it, and you know it too, right? And everybody knows it, but we're going through this weird, hypnosis right now where we're just sort of brainwashing people into being okay with being mediocre. And I think that's just a terrible way to go through life. And it's a terrible thing. It's a terrible trip to put on people's heads too, because it really pushes them off in the wrong direction. Now, so I do, mixed martial arts and, strength and conditioning training to support that, Muay Thai, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And so I'll give you sort of a little lens into my thought process about it. That, what gets me into the gym, aside from, knowing that there are trained killers waiting for me who are going to give me a hard time if I don't show up, right? Which, if you're having a struggle with your fitness, hire personal trainers. I have them everywhere I go, right? More than one usually, right? Mm. So that helps, but knowing several things is what gets me there, right? So I use that, which is a simpleology technique we call Kankyo Kaizen. It's setting, things in your environment to push you in the direction where you would need to go, right? Because we can't always be consciously aware of what we're supposed to do, but if we set up our environment such that it pushes us in the direction where we want to go, or we set up guardrails in the right direction, remove the barriers from things that we want to do and erect barriers in front of the behaviors that we don't want to have. It's tremendously useful in making sure that we get these things done. So, and then also thinking about, where I want to go, why I'm doing it. These are things that will, get me there. When I'm there in the moment, my thought processes vary. It depends on what I'm experiencing. If I am sparring, or if I'm doing something combat related where I'm pushing myself, I sort of tell myself that I'm in a life or death struggle in that moment, right? Of consciously being aware that I can't take it that seriously, because if I do, I'm going to hurt somebody, or they're going to hurt me, and I don't want either of those things to happen. But I think about that, right? In fact, when I do my Wim Hof breathing and I have the breath hold, right? I push myself on the breath hold for a long time. And I imagine that I'm underwater, and that, I'd better hold my breath a little longer. Otherwise I'm not going to get up there and actually live. Right. I use tools like that in the moment sometimes. Also, if it's not as combat related, but it's just sort of like I have to grunt through something, I'll often play a little dance with my mind about the tangible experience of it. So like, when Buddha was saying, if you're aware that suffering is essential, it's not suffering anymore. So I'll give you one. When I was I did a 1 hour, every minute on the minute split squat session a year ago. Right. And that was, so every minute on the minute I had to do 10 split squats. Right. And I did that for an hour. And I told my coach at the time, I said, dude, don't tell me what time it is, right? Don't tell me how many I've done. I said, just let me be. And what I did was I put myself into a trance, right? I said, okay, I am just going to be here in the moment doing these split squats. And as I did it, I was just thinking about, how am I going to do this better? Where is my body? Is my core engaged? Are my glutes engaged? How is my alignment? Am I moving correctly? And I made that a meditation. And I just, and I'd do the 10, and I would, catch my breath and just think about, okay, I'm going to do this again in a second. And, the bell would ring, and boom, I just go. And I was in that trance. And before I knew it, the hour was up, Wow. So yeah, right. It's interesting. And when I did that, you mentioned that it was a half marathon barefoot through New York City. A buddy of mine who I advised to do something, big, he decided he wanted to run barefoot across the United States. And so I did like the first I was supposed to do the first 10K with him and then just said, oh, screw it. I'm doing all right. And I did the whole half marathon. That time I was also in sort of a trance. I was just sort of like, okay, I'm dealing with this in the moment. My feet, don't feel exactly right, but I'm just going to keep pushing through it. I had never run a half marathon before, let alone a half marathon barefoot.
Wow.
Now my legs were a little torn up after that. I had to catch a flight to New Zealand from New York City right after it. And that wasn't fun, but the experience was different because I wasn't focusing on the suffering. I was just focusing on being in the moment and getting, and just allowing it to be whatever it was. And so what I'll point out about this is the suffering that we're tangibly experiencing in the moment is often not as bad as we make it. And we're focusing on like, oh my God, this is so hard. Yeah, we're making it harder. But if we go, hey, well, wait a minute, how much pain is actually here? How much pain am I actually experiencing? What is actually going on in my body? You kind of get outside of yourself and simultaneously into yourself at the same time. And it allows you to endure a lot more. It's been interesting.
That's very good. In fact, you're reminding me, Seneca had said we suffer more in imagination than we do in reality.
That's it, man.
And that's really it. Listen, we're going to be running out of time because this is just an amazing interview, and I can talk to you forever. Do you have a handful of pointers, some takeaways, some to-dos that you would like people to implement? And then the website you want them to go to if they want to enroll in simpleology or check it out and prepare to make 2022 unforgettable.
Man, where would I start with this? So number one, and this is, I'm going to stick with a lot of stuff that we teach inside simpleology and whatever else comes to mind. But one of the things that immediately comes to mind is one of the tools inside simpleology. And that's this lens that we came up with called HIME. It's an acronym for high impact, minimal effort. And it's this really, again, deceptively simple tool, right? That allows you to cut through your indecision crisis, right? Because often when we're presented with many options, we end up not making a decision at all. And something we know as marketers, when you present a prospect with too many decisions, they often end up just, making no decision at all, which is why in the early days of digital marketing, when I was, setting up the, what we called, digital funnels now, I figured out that give them a very linear, one by one series of decisions, and you're going to tend to get better responses, right? So when you're presented with multiple options of what to do, like, hey, which of all these business ideas should I work on? Which action should I perform today? There's, an infinite number of possibilities. Well, what if there was a mathematical way where you could say, you know what, more often than not, this formula is going to show me the right path. And that's what HIME does. So what we do is we have people in the software list out, any number of items, and it could be anything that's, infinitely moldable. And we say, rate it by impact and ease. 10 would be super impactful for impact. 1 would be not very impactful at all. For ease, 1 would be super duper hard. And 10 would be, a piece of cake, right? Not that I advise eating cake. So when you take those two numbers and you multiply them together, that's what we call our HIME score. And what I do and what I advise the people that I work with to do is do that rating. And of course you're guessing because you often don't know. It's just a tool, right? And just say, when I push the button to sort all of those items, to do the math and to sort the list out, I'm going to do whatever the highest score thing is. I'm not going to second guess it. I'm not going to, say, well, maybe this other one would be better. I'm just going to do it. And I commit myself to that. I push the button. There it is. Okay, let's go. Let's make this happen. Now, more often than not, that pushes people in the right direction. And here's the thing. It doesn't have to be the best option. It has to be a slightly better option, right? Because that's all you need to do is make slightly better decisions all the time to win at life. And again, if we do believe that the universe is infinite, then by definition, we can't have that infinite set in our consciousness, right? How do you know what the best option of infinite options are? In fact, there is no best option of infinite
Right.
options, right? There's slightly better and slightly worse ones, and infinitely better and infinitely worse ones. All you got to do is be slightly better, more of the time. And this tool gets you a lot closer to that than you would think. I know there are probably times I go, maybe the number 2 or 3 item would have been better, but I don't care because it allows me to make that decision quickly and keep moving forward. Right.
Well, I can see by just doing the exercise and listing all of those things down that a part of me internally would have calculated where I want it to go. I would have been thinking as I rated all these, boy, I hope number 3 comes up because I'm kind of liking that idea. Yeah. Well, at that point, I don't even need the formula to be completed because I'm going to say, screw it. I want to do number 3. So I can see where it's useful. Yeah.
I was just going to say, if that's the result that people get, that's great too. All I care about is that you make a decision and do something.
Right.
Because, even if you make the wrong decision, you're going to learn something in the doing. You will learn far more in the doing than you will in the studying.
Right.
And people are like, well, I was just talking to somebody yesterday, talking to them about, starting a business. I like to tell a lot of people about starting a business, and, they were doing all the classic stuff. Well, don't I need to study for a bunch of years before I do that? And they came up with a whole bunch of excuses. And I told them, I said, the first thing you need to understand is the brain, the mind, the consciousness, whatever it is, can be an excuse generating machine. And if you train your mind to be really good at that, you're going to come up with endless excuses and talk yourself out of every good idea that you have. And where are you going to be if you continue to do that every day? Project yourself into the future, right? Imagine that you keep doing that. Where are you going to be? Doesn't take an imaginary genius to understand that it's going to lead you to a place that's not very useful.
I'm just checking the time here. You have another tip or 2, and then your website.
You got it. So number 2 would be, I would say you have to understand that the one way of looking at the mind that's useful, that has been really well established in the scientific literature. There was a paper by, I think his name was George Miller from Princeton University, and it was called the magic number 7 plus or minus 2, right? And it's this notion that the conscious working memory, is about, on average, 7 bits of data plus or minus 2, standard deviation out. And so what does that mean? That means that 7 bits of data we can hold in conscious working memory. This is why phone numbers are 7 digits long. It's just been really, really well established in the literature. Well, the amount of information in the world right now is vast. Well, we've been in a really big sea of information always, even before the information age, and we had to reduce our consciousness down to the amount of information that we can handle. But the amount of information that's presented to us now is increasing, and in fact, it's increasing exponentially. In 2004, Eric Schmidt, the former CEO of Google famously said that we're now putting 5 exabytes of data into the stream every day. And to put that in context, if you take all of the data that had been amassed from the dawn of what we currently believe to be the beginning of recorded history, who knows, it could be older than we think, to the end of 2003, that would have been 5 exabytes of data. In 2004, we were putting 5 exabytes of data into the stream every day, right? And the rate at which that is increasing is exponential, right? So who knows how many exabytes or whatever bytes, petabyte, whatever it is that we're putting in every day now, right? That's getting, I call this the complexity gap, right? It's the gap between how much information we can process consciously and how much information is there. This is a far bigger problem than most people realize because it's overwhelming and it's stifling. It's one of the reasons why we procrastinate. It's one of the reasons why we have information overload. So we've got to dump information out of our conscious working memory. Otherwise, it's like, imagine you've got your computer open and you open up one application, more windows, whether you're on a Mac or PC, the same thing is going to happen. Eventually it's going to slow down and it's going to start crawling, right? And even freeze up. That's what happens with your mind when you overload your conscious working memory. So we have this thing in simpleology called the dream catcher, which you would have a thought, an idea to do whatever it is in your mind. You dump it in the dream catcher. And then when you do a process we have called Start My Day, you go through and you make decisions about this stuff. It could be, I want to put this on a do it later list, a nebulous someday I might do it list, right? It could be, I've got lists of marketing ideas, lists of books I want to read, lists of movies to watch, whatever it is. You manage all this information. Some of it you delegate, some of it you put on a schedule. There's all sorts of things to do with this. We guide you through that process until you have your, what we call our daily targets list, which is not a to-do list, right? The to-do list that most people have is the same list that has take out the trash and solve world peace, right? It's the list that never ends, right? And that's another self-punishing mechanism, because we're like, well, I don't like my to-do list because it just reminds me of how incompetent I am. We tell people, no, you got to do something with all that stuff and know that you have a list of things that you're going to do today that you actually do. And there's something liberating and empowering about that process that radically boosts folks' productivity.
This is amazing. You were just full of information. Where do you want people to go to learn more about you, what you do in simpleology?
Well, simpleology.com is where folks can go and they can start a trial of the software. And I would tell people, look, an average response that we get from people is that within 48 hours of using it, and we have a little training in there. We have a training that takes you from a simpleology no belt to a simpleology black belt. Within 48 hours of doing the training, you just click a little button that we have that says do today's training. It walks you through step by step the process of using it. And we train you to master a little bit in the beginning, stuff that's going to make a huge difference right out of the gate, all the way up to the point where you're a black belt. And within 48 hours of doing the basic stuff, people say, and this is not an uncommon thing, I don't have to give a caveat like a results or atypical. No, this is a common response. People say, whoa, dude, it's like 10 a.m. and I've gotten done what would normally take me a full day or even a week to get done. That is a common response we get from people. And it's because they're so dysfunctional and they're so unaware of how they're spending their time. And when they just get control of that, magic starts to happen. And I love doing this for people because it changes things for them.
Well, you change people. Thank you for all that you do. Thanks for simpleology. Thanks for all the books you've written. Thanks for your friendship and support. Thanks for getting up at 4 a.m. and rediverting your energies and your day so that you can do this for me and for everybody watching Zero Limits Living. Thank you.
Always happy to support Joe Vitale. And guys, continue watching Joe's show. As you know, Joe has always got amazing people and amazing ideas. And I love this guy, one of my best friends in the world.
Thank you. Everybody, I air every Friday, and we are on the Apple. I'm pausing because Mark's heartfelt acknowledgement of me choked me up for a second, so I'm going to catch my wind. Thank you, Mark. I want to thank Candace Barr for producing this show, Chris for running the cameras, and luxemediastudios for making this happen. The show airs every Friday at Zero Limits Living. I'm Dr. Joe Vitale. You can watch it on Roku. You can watch it on Apple TV. You can watch it on Amazon Fire. You can watch it on YouTube. You can download the Lux TV app, watch it anywhere you like. You can also go to the website I put up called ZeroLimitsLivingTV.com, ZeroLimitsLivingTV.com, and I'll put all the episodes there. You can also sign up to be notified whenever there's a new episode. Meanwhile, this show has all been about the new year, 2022. Renew you in 2022 using some of the things I talked about, a lot of the things Mark talked about. Go check out simpleology.com. Go check out Mark's books. And as I like to say, expect miracles.
Glutathione is a big word. It's the body's own master antioxidant. It's a scavenger for free radical, bacteria, and viruses. There are no products in the market with the ingredient NASET. NASET increases the production of glutathione that's in our body already to strengthen and enhance our immune system, elevate sense of well-being, support muscle strength and endurance, cognitive function, and liver support. It helps with increased energy and blood sugar regulation. Get your bottle of GSH Plus from www.salvationnutra.com.